Her hands were trembling as the soldiers lifted her into the carriage. She was 16 years old. Court records remember her as Consort Han, one of the Korean tribute women sent into the Ming palace, and she had just been handed over to the Emperor of China. This transition was not one of glory, but of a profound, soul-crushing displacement. Imagine a girl barely across the threshold of womanhood, being treated as a piece of diplomatic currency. The soldier's grip was firm, a reminder that her body was no longer her own. She was part of a larger mechanism of statecraft, a human tax paid in beauty and youth. Behind her, the familiar sounds of her village faded, replaced by the rhythmic clatter of hooves and the heavy silence of her fellow captives. The air inside the carriage was thick with the scent of fear and unwashed silk. Every jolt of the path felt like a final severance from her identity. This was the beginning of a long, cold journey into a world where her voice would never truly be heard again. Her mother wept as she signed the document. She couldn't write, so she used an ink mark. One less daughter to feed, one less mouth in times of famine. It was a choice between starvation and a gilded cage, though the family hardly had a choice at all. Han travelled for weeks in a sealed carriage alongside 15 other Korean maidens. They couldn't look outside, they couldn't speak to each other. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the thin slivers of light through the wood. One girl who tried to escape was brought back with her hand crushed. She died of infection days later. Her body was left at the side of the road, a discarded scrap of humanity. The others learned the lesson. Resistance was not an option. Each mile took them further from their mother's arms and closer to a destiny that felt more like a slow, ornamental execution. They sat in the stifling heat, mourning their own lives while they were still breathing, knowing that the world they once knew was vanishing forever behind the wheels. When the gates of the Forbidden City closed behind her, Han discovered that serving the Son of Heaven had nothing to do with honor. She would live 16 years inside those walls. She would watch an entire harem disappear in a single night. She would beg to see her mother one last time, and she would die in white silk. The architecture was designed to dwarf the human spirit, with towering red walls and golden roofs that seemed to mock the suffering beneath them. This was the center of the world, yet for Han, it was a tomb. Subscribe if you're new, and leave a like if you want script. Historians to keep unearthing these stories, because what comes next is worse. Han's story began the way tens of thousands of others did, with a system designed to harvest young women like crops. The opulence of the Ming court was built on the broken backs and stolen lives of girls like Han, who were expected to be grateful for their own imprisonment. Every step she took on the stones was a step further into a nightmare. When people think of Chinese imperial concubines, they imagine something elegant, beautiful women in embroidered silks writing poetry, a life of luxury serving the most powerful man in Asia. That image is propaganda, a thin layer of gold leaf over a rotting foundation. But the imperial concubine system existed for over 2,000 years. During that time, tens of thousands of women disappeared behind the red walls of the Forbidden City. And what most people don't understand is this. Concubines were not wives. They weren't considered human under imperial law. They were classified as precious objects, literally equated to porcelain vases in the palace ledgers. Their value was entirely aesthetic and functional. Stripped of agency or legal protection, they were assets to be moved, displayed, or discarded at the emperor's whim. Script historians aims to peel back this layer of romanticization to reveal the industrial scale of the dehumanization involved. To the state, Han was not a daughter, she was a tribute. Every 3 years, his imperial officials traveled through the provinces in what they called the Shunu selection. Sounds elegant, don't be fooled. It wasn't an audition, it was a forced harvest of the empire's youth. During the Ming Dynasty, no family was exempt. All unmarried young women of eligible age had to be presented. Hiding a daughter was a crime, punishable by death for the entire family. Imagine the terror of a father trying to smudge the beauty of his child to save her, only to face the headsman's axe if he failed. Candidates were inspected by eunuchs and palace physicians. They checked every inch of their bodies for imperfections, birthmarks, or scars. Any defect disqualified them from the emperor's bed, but being perfect was its own curse. Those who passed were taken, ripped from their homes in the middle of their childhoods. Families received minimal compensation, but refusing the money meant admitting treason. The system didn't need to kidnap. Poverty and the law did the job. And what happened to the families left behind? Most never heard from their daughters again. Letters were forbidden. Visits were impossible. Occasionally, if a concubine rose to high rank, her family might receive a small stipend, a bitter price for a lost child. But for the vast majority, their daughters simply vanished into the red walls. Some families held funerals for daughters who were still alive because they understood the truth. The girl they raised was already gone. She had become a ghost in the Forbidden City, a name on a list of property. Han arrived in China as part of a different tribute. Korea sent women to the Ming Empire as part of diplomatic agreements. Between 1408 and 1435, more than 100 Korean women were sent to the Forbidden City, not as visitors, but as property. The day Han crossed the palace gates, she ceased to exist as a person. She became a number, a possession of the Son of Heaven. She was a diplomatic gift, no different from fine silk, expected to perform her role. But before she could serve, she had to be broken. The selected women didn't go directly to the harem. First, they went through what the eunuchs called refinement, a process that could last between 6 months and 2 years. The first phase was identity destruction. They cut their hair, a sign of dishonor in Chinese culture, severing their connection to their ancestors. Their names were replaced with numbers or generic titles. They were forbidden to speak of their families, and mentioning their mother resulted in physical punishment. Any personal possession from home was confiscated and burned. The women slept in barracks, 20 to a room. They were woken before dawn and went to sleep after midnight. For months they existed in a state of exhaustion so complete that resistance became physically impossible. This was psychological warfare, designed to strip away the self until only a hollow vessel remained. By the time they reached the inner chambers, they were no longer individuals with real pasts. The second phase was submission training. The women learned dozens of different ways to bow. They practiced 8 hours a day. If a bow was poorly executed, they were beaten with bamboo rods on their legs. Many carried those scars until death. They learned to walk without making noise, to keep their gaze lowered, to respond without being asked, to exist without taking up space, to smile when they wanted to scream. One training manual from the Qing Dynasty lists 47 different rules for how to stand in the emperor's presence. 47 ways to exist in a single moment. Violation of any rule meant punishment. The third phase was preparation to serve the emperor. Historical documents describe a systematic process designed to eliminate any physical or psychological resistance. The women were examined monthly. Those considered inadequate were subjected to treatments that palace records describe with clinical coldness. This was not education, it was the domesticating of a human soul in silence. Palace medical records describe the process with chilling detachment. Notes from 1723 refer to candidates presenting resistance and preparation protocols that required multiple sessions. The clinical language barely disguises what was being done to these women behind palace walls. These were administrative records, official documents written as if they were talking about training horses or tempering steel. After months of this, the women who survived were considered ready to enter a world where their suffering had only just begun. After training, the girls entered the official system, and here began another form of hell. The hierarchy was brutal. At the top, the empress, the emperor's only official wife. Below her, the imperial consorts. Then high-ranking concubines divided into multiple levels. And at the bottom, common concubines, sometimes hundreds of them, and preparation women, girls whose fate had not yet been decided. Your rank determined everything. The amount of food you received. The empress received more than 22 pounds of prime meat every day. A low-ranking concubine received barely 4 pounds, and often not even that, because provisions were stolen by corrupt eunuchs before reaching the kitchens. Many low-ranking concubines suffered from malnutrition. Their teeth fell out, their hair thinned, and they aged decades in years. The cruelest irony was that their declining appearance made them even less likely to be summoned. It was a downward spiral designed into the system. The emperor didn't visit his concubines, they were summoned. Every night a eunuch presented the emperor with wooden tablets bearing the names and portraits of available women. The emperor pointed to one, and then the ritual began. The chosen